Hello, everybody. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. This is We All Be. I am Brother Ron, and welcome to the We All Be Beautification Experience. Wait for people to come on through. Come on through, y'all. Come on through. Brother Ron be starting late, but Brother Ron be on time. Can you dig it, man? We're going to get through this Black history. Sometimes you got to just soldier it on out. Sometimes you got to soldier it on out because you never know what blessing you can be to other folk. So I am here to spread the good news that we all be in it to win it. That's right, boys and girls, scholars and laymen. We all be in it to win it. Got a great show for you all. Thank you all for listening and for people giving me feedback. I really appreciate it because we love you madly. In the words of the great Duke Ellington, got a show for you today because one thing we don't do is talk enough about Black folks' issues. We think we be talking about Black folk issues, but a lot of that be gossip and celebrity news. And that doesn't pay the bill for a lot of Black folk. We still be broke. You know, what's going on, who's sleeping, screwing, sucking, and all that stuff ain't gonna pay the bills unless you screw for a living. So we're gonna plug this stuff in to the matrix here. We're gonna create a revolution by creating a counter narrative. We're gonna create a revolution by creating a counter narrative. You know, everybody likes to call Brother Ron, but Brother Ron's only one person. Brother Ron don't return everybody phone calls or emails, and sometimes the stuff get overwhelming. Everybody, all this stuff. Well, I tell people, this is a year of the mailman. Don't follow the mailman around on his route. Just go to your mailbox and get the mail. Caprende, you know what I'm saying? Just go to your mailbox, get the mail, and do what you want with the information. If it's just junk mail to you, throw it away or whatever. If it's mail you want to hold on to and marinate on, by all means, please marinate on it. But Brother Ron, just a mailman of information dissemination. Brother Ron, R2C2H2, the artist. Please promote this live podcast through your networks because when you network, your net worth grows. When you network, your net worth grows. I want y'all to marinate on that. Some things I want y'all to marinate as we get ready. Don't let the traumas of your yesterdays rob you of the triumphs of your tomorrows. Once again, let me say this. Don't let the traumas of your yesterdays rob you of the triumphs of your tomorrows. Very important stuff there, people. You are in control of your destiny. You are the writer of the screenplay of your movie. You are the director. You are the lead actor. You are the executive producer. You are the one that determines the quality of your movie, the genre of your movie, which is your life. You are the person that selects and creates the soundtrack of your life. So many of us like drama, but a lot of us don't like responsibility or accountability when it comes to our own, when it comes to self. And let me put this on your mind as well. Real freedom knows no destination, security net, or limits. Once again, real freedom knows no destination, security net, or limits. Think about that. And people talking about they want freedom, yet they're afraid because they try to say, well, what do we do? Man, when we get our freedom, what we do? What we do when we get our freedom? It don't make a difference what you do. Because to be free is Sometimes not to know. It's okay not to know what you're going to do. I know what people ask me when I just moved out of my apartment. I've been in my apartment for about 14 months. I love my apartment. I enjoyed it. It felt good to be comfortable in a place that you could just be yourself and enjoy your surroundings and have space. But at the same time, um, I know there's more out there for me to get and to manifest and to create and to receive. So I just gave up my apartment, and now I'm, in the process of, about to experience more unique things. I want to receive all my inheritance while I'm here. What I mean by inheritance, I mean what the universe has for me to get. I won't by any means necessary. So people say, well, where are you going? I say, I don't really know. I'm just out here, just experiencing life. And people say, well, you got to go somewhere. I mean, well, I guess we all got to die one day. I mean, we know that, right? But between birth and death, everything else is a mystery until you make it real. Between birth and death, everything else is a mystery until you make it real. So, I mean, it's interesting. And like people asked me yesterday about that YouTube live I did. That was basically at the Ernest Withers Collection and Gallery on Bill Street. What used to be Ernest Withers' studio. Ernest Withers was like one of the most prolific photographers of the 20th century. He is known as the dean of civil rights photographers. He took a lot of famous pictures during the civil rights movement period. He was well respected by Dr. King and his peer group. So Ernest Withers was the one who photographed the sanitation worker strike when they had the "I am a man" signs up, marching and protesting in Memphis. He was the one who helped develop the film, the photo of Dr. King lying down on a balcony with people pointing across. They're trying to point to where the shot came from. He helped develop that film. And in recent memory, he's also known as an FBI informant. Like, it was exposed after he passed away. He died in 2007, I think October of 2007, but it was exposed several years later by the Memphis Commercial Appeal that he was an FBI informant, that he was snitching on folks in the movement. And my thing is, the guy who wrote the article, he had a lot of access to Mr. Ernest Withers over the years. So I don't understand why he didn't ask Mr. Withers straight up now, tell me some shit like that. Why he didn't really ask Ernest Withers, was he a FBI informant to his face? Because the guy who wrote the hit piece in the Commercial Appeal had access to Mr. Withers for years. So I just thought that was like this sloppy attempt to slander somebody. But they said they got the legitimate information with his FBI informant number, and that's not really unusual that he was an FBI informant back then, because the FBI approached a lot of people in the movement to give them information about the movement. And I did a couple shows back in 2010. I'm about to put it on YouTube. I haven't put it on YouTube yet. It's in the archives. I mean, News has a very extensive archive of information that we have done, because I've been doing this for 11 years. Been doing interviews and talking about stuff for 11 years. So we have a big archive, and I have not put everything out on YouTube and other places. But I interviewed people that knew Mr. Withers well, his colleagues, his family, and also other folks who had strong opinions on Mr. Withers and his legacy, and the allegations or the revelation of him being an FBI informant. So Mr. Withers, when I talked to people like Reverend City Vivian, he said that Mr. Withers did more good than harm, because he helped document the movement. He helped promote the cause. Whereas you got people like the late great Baba Dick Gregory, who said he thought that Ernest Withers was a Judas. He betrayed the movement. And I have mixed feelings on Mr. Withers myself. Mr. Withers was like one of the first Black police officers in the modern era of Memphis. He was hired as a police officer back in the late 40s, and ended up, leaving that job, that profession, and becoming a professional photographer. He actually took pictures or photos of the killers at the trial, the people who killed Emmett Till. the brothers J.W. Malcolm and Roy Bryant. He was present at that trial down in Sumner, Mississippi. He took photos of that trial. I believe he took the famous photo of Emmett Till's great uncle Mose Wright pointing out the white man who killed his great nephew. Said, "There be, there they be, there they be, there they be, there they be." You know, so he took those photos, and there's a lot of photos of the movement that he took that he don't get credit for. I mean, you can find it online and in documentaries and the feature films. People have been using his work over the years, his intellectual property, and not giving him proper credit for it. So look up Ernest Withers. He's a very fascinating dude, and led a very fascinating life. I actually had a chance to talk to Mr. Withers in his studio, where his museum is located now on Beale Street. I want to say it was 2004. 2004. Had a very enlightened conversation with him. I actually wrote a story about it, and he basically, I was just asking him like, how can you do this stuff that you do, and you know you're not getting all the credit that you deserve to get, or people have taken advantage of your kindness. And he said basically like that Rudyard Kipling quote about, if you can keep your head while everybody else is losing theirs. That quote, you could, if you could be a king, and still retain a common touch. So basically, just say, he practiced that model of the Rudyard Kipling quote. So, and people say, well, he betrayed. Well, I look at it, his involvement like this. He used to be a police officer. Um, he was a professional photographer, and he was open for business. He was freelancing. So let's say he took pictures or photographs of a meeting on, a movement meeting, and he met with his FBI handler. He showed him the photographs. He point out the people in the photographs to identify the people. He gives them a summary of what happened. He gets paid. I mean, he was a professional photographer who was freelancing. So was he an FBI informant? Did he snitch out Dr. King? Did he betray the movement? That's open to debate. But did he mastermind the killing Dr. King? No. He was not involved in that on that level. It was the government. It's been proven that the U.S. government killed Dr. King. It was not Ernest Withers. It was not Jesse Jackson. Whoever y'all think, black leaders, yeah, they need to be held accountable for their part. But the federal government said that Dr. King had to go. The U.S. intelligence people said that Dr. King had to go. The military industry complex said that Dr. King had to go. Organized crime said Dr. King had to go. There you go. So it wasn't Ernest Withers. It wasn't Jesse Jackson that pulled that trigger. It was his own government, who Dr. King said was the greatest purveyor of violence on the planet. Now, to understand that, Dr. King died trying to redistribute the wealth of this country. That's why he had that poor people campaign in 68. But he was killed in Memphis before he could actually, be a part, actually take part in the demonstrations in DC, because their goal was to shut down the government and make demands. Because in 63, Dr. King was talking about a bounce check. See, that I Have a Dream speech was not just about dreams, it was about reparations. Dr. King was talking about reparations in that I Have a Dream speech. Listen to the whole speech for yourself. Read the text for yourself. It's available. Okay? So don't say, see, white media, white folks think they got the right to dictate history and like to whitewash things and hide things. Hidden figures, hidden colors, whatever you want. But white inferiority system likes to marginalize the participation and the self-determination of black folk in this system. They do not recognize the H-U-E, humanity of black people. But black people must learn to detox and reprogram and reboot our stinking thinking and get back on track to understand who we are. We are the descendants of the righteous ancestors who could lay claim to not only be Americans, but the Aboriginal people of this continent. Recognize that. Embrace that. Wake up. So, Dr. King did not die because he liked to gang bang prostitutes and run trains on light-skinned women and white girls. Dr. King did not die because he plagiarized his dissertation for his doctorate degree. Dr. King died because he was a threat to the powers that be, because he wanted to redistribute the wealth and make sure that every American had a living wage and a reasonable work week. This goes back to what Huey Long was trying to do back in the 1930s. Now, I make this argument all the time that the 1930s were more revolutionary than the 1960s. I make that case all the time because you got to understand, Representative Adam Clayton Powell Jr., Reverend Adam Clayton Powell Jr. was doing the boycotts and the sit-ins up in New York for Black people rights back in the 30s. And I talked about in previous programs what Senator Huey Long for Louisiana was trying to do with the Share the Wealth movement that he had. They had 8 million members nationwide. He had 8 million people in his organization. This is before social media, and he knew how to utilize the social media platform of the day, which was radio, and because he had like 20 million listeners on radio. He had Father Coughlin, a supporter of Huey Long, who had 25 million, 40 million listeners on radio. This is back in the 30s. These guys was going against the grain. They was taking on the Federal Reserve and the powers that be, and they paid the price for it. They cared to assassinate Father Coughlin, and they assassinated physically Huey Long. So you look at decades later, you can hardly find stuff on Huey Long, and if you do find things on Huey Long, a lot of that shit is negative by default. Because look at Dr. King. At the end, Dr. King was one of the least like Americans in the country because the media machine made it that way. We talk about places like New York Times and the Washington Post. They all like U.S. intelligence. Washington Post been CIA. Captain Graham, the owner of the Washington Post, was all in the CIA. All that CIA information. They control information dissemination and cultural appropriations. The CIA was big into media and still is big in the media. They got their hands all in the media complex in Hollywood and entertainment complexes. You got to do this research. I'm not going to sit here and do Brother Ron. I'm just a mailman, delivering mail. It's for you to take the mail and do what you want with it. Research some more. Take a look. It's all online or in a book. Okay. And also, it's your duty. If you have got anything for what I've been saying over the years, what I have done over the years, please feel free to donate. Use the super chat button here as I do this live podcast. Utilize PayPal, make a one-time donation, or make a recurring donation through PayPal or through patreon.com at We All Be. I want to thank all the brothers and sisters who have been making donations and contributions, who've been buying Artivist gear. I want to thank you all because I do it for the love of the people, but when you serve our people, you must love our people to serve our people correctly. Because sometimes it could be a thankless job. It could be very indifferent response you get from the people. So yeah, I'm doing all this. I'm putting it all on the line because no guts, no glory. Like, and to paraphrase the words of the late great Chairman Fred Hampton Sr., if you don't struggle, if you don't dare to struggle, you can't win. If you don't dare to struggle, you cannot win this war. And this is very much not just a physical war, it's a war for information, it's a war for your spirit, and it's a war for your soul. So be aware. How can y'all trust these feds, right? How can y'all trust the government? The government killed Dr. King. He said the greatest purveyor of violence on the planet is my own government. How can you go with the official story? No, y'all, we talk about Super Bowl, we talk about halftime shows. We talk about This Is Us TV shows, but nobody's talking about Flint, Michigan. People are still suffering in Flint. Where's the outrage? Y'all talking about revolution, but who's willing to go raise up in Flint? Why haven't the people raised up in Flint? Because you cannot fight liberation for an oppressed people. The oppressed people must decide to raise up. Like Dr. King said, they can only ride your back when it's bent. Stand up straight and advocate for yourself. You know, the Russian Revolution, they wanted bread and land. But you gotta understand, these wars are the ultimate blood sacrifices. Like the Rothschild, like I said before, the Rothschild banking dynasty really started when they decided to finance the British government against Napoleon. So understand where you at. And I do a lot of repetition because repetition is one of the hallmarks of true learning. You must keep on repeating, because sometimes I get emails from people, I get voicemails, and I swear I be saying stuff over and over again, and they'll talk about, well, Brother Ron, this and that. I already told you about that. You just go back in the archives. You know what I'm saying? Like, just listen a little bit more and do your own research. But I pointed you in the direction on that. So, I mean, like I said, this is the mailman. This year, the mailman. I'm just dropping off the mail, going about my route, and then whatever I do on my personal business, my personal business. I'm not going to pose to you as being some type of leader, some type of messianic leader. I'm not that. Not interested in being that. I'm more interested in being a full human being and enjoying the rights of a full human being. I want to enjoy my birthright. You know, so we all have a right to be treated as decent, honorable people, but we must demand that. Like Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing while demand. Like I said, please feel free, family. If whatever I said or have said in the past have benefited you, support the We All Be information movement. And I'm about to get into the topics. Now I want to touch upon some things today. Right now, the We All Be Group Incorporated is working with the Shelby County Historical Commission to properly recognize the righteous ancestors who were the victims of the Fort Pillow Massacre of 1864. That's right, boys and girls, scholars and laymen. We are working with the establishment to properly honor our ancestors in a very big way with a historic marker to commemorate, to reflect, to remember the sacrifices made by the ancestors in the Fort Pillow Massacre of 1864. Now, much ado has been said about the removal of the Nathan Bedford Forrest statue from downtown Memphis, which I think is really farcical. To be honest with you, it's a joke, because his remains because the remains of Nathan Bedford Forrest and his wife are still buried in that park. They've been in that park for 113 years. That statue was in that park for 112 years. And Yo Gotti's billboard for Memphis City Schools or Shelby County Schools was up for 24 hours before it was taken down. You see how the bullshit works? That's the games, folks. It's a game. But with that said, people was applauding these people for removing the statues, but they left the bodies in the park. So mission not accomplished. It really was bullshit, because to be honest with you, I had no problems with the statue. My problem with the statue was that the descendants of the people that Nathan Bedford Forrest terrorized and exploited as a war criminal, as the first Grand Wizard of the KKK, and as well as a prolific slave trader, should not be paying for the upkeep on the statue and his memorial. We, as citizens of Memphis, the descendants of enslaved Africans, of prisoners of war, should not be paying taxes for the upkeep of the statue and memorial. It should be the responsibility of the people who admired Forrest, who raised the funds to erect the statue and that monument in the first place. It should be on the people of Memphis to do so, majority black city. So I even told the organizers of Nathan Bedford Forrest's birthday rallies, because for the last 112 years, every Sunday before his birthday of July 13th, the friends, admirers, supporters of the legacy of General Nathan Bedford Forrest will come to Memphis to what was once known as Forest Park to honor Nathan Bedford Forrest. This was a pilgrimage. This was a spiritual, religious moment for these people. You had people by the hundreds and some years by the thousands. Y'all call them white supremacists. I call them white inferiority advocates, white nationalists, Klansmen, sons and daughters of the Confederacy. All these folks will come to Memphis in 100-degree weather to honor this man. They would have their watermelon and their forest water on hand. They would have Civil War reenactors with horses and 21 gun salute, Confederate flags, open and carry guns everywhere. And it will be me and maybe a handful of brave black folks will come into the lion's den like Daniel, and we was not obstructing their right to freedom of speech and expression, but rather we observe, we engage, we ask why, who is forced to you. We gave our point of view. We all agreed to disagree without being too disagreeable. But my thing was, you using taxpayers' money to keep up the upkeep on this monument. You got about 20 police escorts. That's taxpayer money. So you using our police, using our monies to upkeep your symbol of white inferiority, of hate on black folks' dimes who pay, the taxes on that. We pay the salaries of the Memphis Police Department, but yet you using our police to escort you all and to protect you all from the black folks in Memphis. A lot of us still don't have no understanding or the significance of those events. I have taken time. I've been going down there for the last 3 years. I don't know if I'm going to go this year because I don't know. I mean, they still got the bodies in the park, but who knows? You know, one of the people who is working with us to honor the Fort Pillow Massacre victims is a spokesperson for the Sons of Confederate Veterans. He works in the sheriff department. He works in the police department, the Shelby County Sheriff's Department. Lee Millar. He is a person who is actually working with us. We all be Group Incorporated and other people in the community to get this marker done in honor of the Fort Pillow Massacre victims. The person who led the Confederacy in that horrendous moment was General Nathan Bedford Forrest. He was the one that attacked Fort Pillow. Now it's questionable if he gave the command to slaughter all those black people. Around 300 black folks were killed, Union soldiers and women and children, because there were civilians at that fort. And so we had a meeting yesterday for 2 hours to go over the text, and it's still like that event happened almost 150 something years ago, maybe 154 years ago this year, and yet people are still raw about it. You know, we're still debating, was it a massacre or was it just a battle? When did the battle become a massacre? You know, it's like on Sunday on football, is that a catch? When did that become a catch? Are you sure that's a catch? A touchdown. You know, there's craziness because white inferiority system does not want to admit any type of accountability, whether it be yesterday, 5 minutes ago, 154 years ago, that they have screwed over black people. Because to admit that you screwed over black people means you owe me something. You owe me something. Okay? Okay? But anyway, so we're working on this marker. We plan to have it unveiled and ready for the 154th anniversary of the Fort Pillow Massacre. We're going to have it placed outside the Memphis National Cemetery. Because I'm going to tell y'all basically what the Fort Pillow Massacre was about and how we got to this point where we got a marker that we're preparing to honor our ancestors. And y'all need to support We All Be. Like I said, I'm not just Brother Ron on YouTube Live talking and speaking rhetoric and just signifying nothing. We're actually doing real work, brick and mortar work in the community to rectify wrongs, generational wrongs. We are for reparations, And part of reparations is telling the truth about what happened to black people, what black folks have experienced in this Holocaust that people call the goddamn American dream, what black folks' nightmares were. When that woman said that this land was made by dreamers, the first lady from the previous administration said she lived in a house that was built by slaves. Are they dreamers or are they slaves? Was it a dream or was it a goddamn nightmare? Make up your goddamn minds, people. But know this history. So a part that we have, the people that are in the know, it is our obligation and our duty for generations to come to rectify this bullshit and tell the truth about what happened. So one of the means that we're doing is that we're utilizing the system, the man, to make a demand to tell the damn truth. So this is why this marker is so important. This is why we spent over 2 hours yesterday trying to make sure that the right language is tied to this marker, that this is acknowledged by the establishment as a massacre and not just a damn battle. It was a massacre. It was systemic genocide. It was the torture, the breakup of the black family unit. You had men, women, and child of color who was slaughtered. No quarter. See, we even argue about no quarter, no surrender, because Jefferson Davis said in response to Abraham Lincoln with this Emancipation Proclamation that they would not take black folks as prisoners of war. We either going to kill you or we're going to make sure you go back into slavery. Okay? This is what we're dealing with. So this is the We All Be Group Incorporated, but this is We All Be News. See, Brother Ron, we, everybody talking. I don't know. People that's talking, I'm doing action. I'm an action hero. Shit. But anyway, the Fort Pillow Massacre. A synopsis. April 12, 1864, Nathan Bedford Forrest, with a force of maybe 1,500 to 2,300 Confederate rebels. We argued over the number about that. It could be maybe as many as, or at least 1,500, but even as much as 2,300 rebel forces, the Confederacy. They demanded that the people at the Fort Pillow installation, which is located in Henning, Tennessee, which is also the birthplace of Alex Haley, the guy y'all think wrote Roots and Malcolm X, the autobiography of Malcolm X, the guy y'all think wrote that but was sued in a federal court by Dr. Harold Corlander, the author of The African that was published in 1967, which the character Kunta Kinte is based upon, and he had to settle with Dr. Harold Corlander for a lot of money. His publishing did. But anyway, that Henning, Tennessee is where Fort Pillow was located. And Nathan Bedford Forrest allegedly demanded the surrender of the fort. And the people in the fort knew that if they surrendered, they were dead anyway. So I guess, depending on your source of your information, Nathan Bedford Forrest gave the order of no quarter, means no surrender. We kill them all. So a lot of people were slaughtered that day. A lot of black people were slaughtered that day. You had black folks run into the Mississippi River to get away, and they drowned, and they were shot. The river ran blood. The river ran blood. The river ran red. Excuse me. That's also the book about the Fort Pillow Massacre, written by author Andrew Ward, The River Run Red. I actually interviewed brother Andrew Ward about the Fort Pillow Massacre last year, around the time of last year's anniversary. That's available on We All Be TV's YouTube channel, The River Run Red, Andrew Ward. That's a book about the Fort Pillow Massacre. So even in Nathan Bedford Forrest reports, he talked about how the river ran red with blood. So he talked about how so many soldiers to escape from the rebel forces ran into the Mississippi River. And the Mississippi River has a strong current, so it could take your ass under at any moment. So you had people running into the river for their lives, getting shot in the back as they ran and drowned. So even him, he don't know how many black folks that they killed, but also there were black women and children killed as well. You can read some primary sources from both sides that talk about how this was a massacre. Maybe, I think the initial battle lasted maybe 20 to 40 minutes, but the killing kept going on. We don't know how long the killing went on, but we know the killing went on. Okay, you had buildings and hospital tents where people were burned alive. they were set afire by somebody. We even argue who set the buildings on and the who set the buildings and tents on fire. Some people there say it was the Union. Other folks said it was Confederates. You know, it's just like y'all don't understand how powerful words are. Your words create worlds, and whoever controls history, they control the destiny of the people. So it's so important that we know our history, and we not only document this history, but we make sure we control our narrative as it relates to this history. So you have all this stuff going on. We know black folks were bayoneted, you know, them long knives on the rifles. They was poking black folks' eyes out. They were cutting black folks' heads. They were decapitating black people. They killed women and children. They were bashing in babies' heads. You know, all this stuff could be found online. And just because it's a primary source, when I say primary source, it's a source from that time. So when I'm talking about primary sources, I'm talking about newspaper articles from that period in time when this atrocity occurred. You know, people got agendas. All wars are political. All wars are blood sacrifices. And a lot of times it's the victor who gets the rights to history. And so, with that said, I want to share with you because Abraham Lincoln also did an inquiry. Cause my thing, like I told him yesterday in the meeting, if it wasn't a massacre, if they weren't killing people throughout the whole day, how come you had some black soldiers pretending to be dead? Why would you pretend to be dead if you was not in fear of your life? If all you had to do was surrender, why did you fear, you know, surrendering and pretend to be dead? Because you had black folks that were buried alive, they were set on fire, they were gutted when they surrendered, had their eyes poked out, were decapitated. These are from primary sources. But let me see if I can find some other information. This is what Abraham Lincoln said about, you know, the Fort Pillow massacre, because he sent a congressional inquiry down south to Tennessee and I believe Cairo, Illinois, to interview some of the survivors of the Fort Pillow massacre. And that's why I'm saying it's why it's so important that y'all support shows like what we're doing right now, because I'm not trying to exploit, I'm trying to liberate your mind, but you got to liberate your own mind. What I'm doing, I'm giving you the kindle wood to set that fire ablaze. My soul's on fire. Wish I could find this stuff, but support we all be, y'all. I'm trying to find the exact quote. Because even Nathan Bedford Forrest, when people was disputing yesterday, were there women and children present, and were women and children killed along with the black soldiers, or they call them color troops, the U.S. color troops, the U.S. color troops. And even Forrest admitted that there were civilians there that they scattered, that they were like running for their lives when they attacked the fort. And so, see, war is hell. War is ugly. I'm just trying to find the Lincoln quote, but you can find this online. What Abraham Lincoln said about Fort Pillow. I'm just trying to find the exact quote. And we talking about Fort Pillow, and we got another massacre, alleged massacre to talk about. What happened at Camp Van Dorn? I know a lot of y'all might not be familiar with Camp Van Dorn, but that was fascinating. The information on Camp Van Dorn. And some people say it didn't happen. Some people said it did happen. You know, that was the World War II massacre. Allegedly that happened at Camp Van Dorn down in Mississippi. Now, Camp Van Dorn is a military museum now. But back then it was a camp where they were training soldiers for war. In this case, World War II. And allegedly over 1,000 black soldiers were killed by the military police down there and stacked up, you know, in railroad cars heading somewhere. Now, some people believe that the majority of those black soldiers were buried where is now a man-made lake. You know, they was buried in a place where there's now a man-made lake. but some people think they were taken elsewhere. And it was a guy named Carroll Case, who was a former banker down there and an artist. He wrote a novel about it called Daughter, and it came out in the late 90s. It caused a lot of storm of controversy. It's supposed to be made into a movie, but like people like the U.S. government, the military got involved, and the NACP got involved in trying to investigate to see if something happened at Camp Van Dorn in the fall of 1943 that took the lives of over 1,000 black people, or over 1,000 black GIs. So they actually was investigating this. The first time the Army investigated was a bullshit investigation. They didn't even go down to Camp Van Dorn, but there was a second investigation on the way because of pressure from the NAACP and the U.S. Congressman Benny Thompson, who is the current representative down in Mississippi. U.S. Representative Benny Thompson, along with the NAACP, put pressure on the U.S. military to try to properly investigate what really happened, if anything happened. But guess what happened? September 11th. So as soon as September 11th happened, that's when everything stalled and everybody else's attention was averted elsewhere, and the rest they say is history. But we're going to talk about Camp Van Dorn, but I want to really focus on what Abraham Lincoln said. And this is what he said. Fort Pillow Massacre happened April 12th, 1864. On May 3rd, 1864, President Lincoln sent a memo to his cabinet. It is now quite certain that a large number of our colored soldiers with their officers were by the rebel force massacred after they had surrendered at the recent capture of Fort Pillow. So much is known, though the evidence is not yet quite ready to be laid before me. Meanwhile, I will thank you to prepare and give me in writing your opinion as to what course the government should take in the case. That's Abraham Lincoln on May 3rd, 1864. He admitted that it was a massacre. And who won the war? The Union won the war. So the victors get to write the history of the war. So if you got the president, the leader of the U.S. government, saying that it is a massacre, it was a massacre. Now, the Union Army, the Union government, whatever, the U.S. government ain't no saints either. They have their own problems. Y'all look up Devil's Punch Bowl down in Natchez, Mississippi, the Devil's Punch Bowl. That's another, thing. They had Camp Douglas in Chicago. Everybody know about Andersonville down in Georgia, the Confederate prisoner of war camp. But a lot of folks don't know about Camp Douglas, the Union prisoner of war camp in Chicago. It did a lot of human rights violations. The Devil Punch Bowl, you had over like maybe 20,000 black people dying in agony, dumped into the Devil's Punch Bowl, which is near the Mississippi River. At the hands of the Union Army, allow these black folks to die tragically and horribly. And where the ancestors died is now peach orchards. So you got peaches growing in the place where the ancestors died, down in Natchez, Mississippi. Natchez, Mississippi got a lot of rich black history because that's also the place where they had the Rhythm Club fire of 1940 that happened on April 23rd, 1940, where about almost 300 black folks got killed in a fire, one of the worst building fires in American history. I still think it's in the top 10 of worst building fires of all time in U.S. history. So Abraham Lincoln admitted that it was indeed a massacre. And I would suggest you all to read up on this. Like I said, I suggest a book you all read, The River Run Red by Andrew Ward. That's a book that's about the Fort Pillow Massacre. And this is why the work we're doing in We All Be is so important, because we're creating a historic marker to honor their ancestors who lost their lives, and even working with people who are great admirers of Nathan Bedford Forrest to do it. See how God works, Very fascinating. Let me see if I can find that quote that Forrest said. Because Forrest admitted to killing a lot of people, his people. And to Forrest, I'm not trying to make him a saint, because even General William T. Sherman, the guy who burnt down Atlanta, the Union general, he called Forrest the devil. His enemies called him the devil. He the devil, the devil. The devil made me do it. Oh my God. The things we do. I'm trying to find. Okay. This is what General Ford said in his report. He said a demand was made for the surrender, which was refused. The victory was complete, and the loss of the enemy would never be known from the fact that large numbers ran into the river and were shot and drowned. The force was composed of about 500 Negroes and 200 white soldiers, Tennessee Tories. The river was dyed with the blood of the slaughtered for 200 yards. There was in the fort a large number of citizens who had fled there to escape the conscript law. That's Nathan Bedford Forrest from the dead. That's Forrest Gump kinfolk. Run, Forrest, run, Forrest, run. That's his kinfolk. The first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. He's the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. He's the first Grand Wizard. What wizard? He said that it was slaughtered. Slaughter, massacre, same difference. He said that from his words, the Wizard of the Saddle. And Nathan Bedford Forrest was a killer, man. He not only killed black people, he killed a bunch of white people and got away with it. He did some unforgiving shit on some white dudes that killed his uncle and business partner. He went Clint Eastwood unforgiving on their ass. And one of them ended up serving with him in the Confederacy. They served under him. See, white folks are interesting like that. Like Al Capone, for example. Scarface. You know how he got that scar? He was working at Harvard's Inn for Frankie Yale. Think about that. Harvard Inn for Frankie Yale in Coney Island, Brooklyn, New York, baby. And he was sexually harassing a young lady. Hashtag me too. And she didn't like his advances, and he said some improper shit. And her brother, Frank Galluccio, another hood, heard Al Capone disrespect his sister. So he stepped up to Al Capone, put out his knife, and started slashing at Al Capone's, trying to cut his neck, trying to make him cut his neck. But instead of cutting his neck, he cut his cheek twice. That's how he got the term Scarface. And this dude, Frank Galluccio, however you want to pronounce it, he ended up working for Al Capone when he was in Chicago, became one of Al Capone's bodyguards, whatever. So anyway, white folks, even when they hate each other, they can work with each other. Even if they hate each other guts, they'll find a way. You know what? I hate this son of a bitch, but I'm gonna work with this motherfucker. I like him. He got balls. He got chutzpahs. I'm gonna work with him, okay? Make him a deal. An offer he can't refuse. Bada bing, bada boom. Okay. Nathan Bedford Forrest, although he was a war criminal, he was respected. Like William T. Sherman, they had respect for Nathan Bedford Forrest because they know he was a military genius. But yet, that does not excuse the fact that he was one of this country's most prolific slave traders. And that's another flaw. You talking about removing Nathan Bedford Forrest's statue, but yet across the bridge, there's a city that he founded and named for himself, Forest City, Arkansas. Nathan Bedford Forrest founded that city and named it after him, and the majority of the population is black. I believe that's the same place where they had T.I. for those Fed gun charges. He was staying in prison in Forest City, Arkansas. Yeah, the new Jim Crow. So Nathan Bedford Forrest has a living legacy, and not only that, his slave market was located on Adams Street in Memphis. Now Adams Street is the home of juvenile court, one of the most corrupt juvenile courts in the country. So his legacy is very much living. He is also a founding father of the private prison movement or the private prison industry, because after the war, he had a very lucrative contract with Shelby County to use black convict labor to work what is now known as President's Island. That's an island that exists in the Mississippi River between Arkansas and Memphis. So this guy had his hands all filthy in human degradation. A true master exploiter. His slave market was one of the largest, if not the largest slave market in the peddling of human flesh in the country, before the Civil War. He made his family fortune through slavery and selling of black folks. Now, he had a mistress, a concubine. He had some sex property that, she was pregnant with his daughter. She ran away. And because of this, Nathan Bedford Forrest's great grandson is the one and only Douglas Turner Ward, who is a proud black man from Louisiana and is the founder of the Negro Ensemble Company, the same acting and theatrical organization that discovered and cultivated the careers of people like Denzel Washington, Angela Bassett, James Earl Jones, Samuel Jackson, anybody you could think of, Morgan Freeman. They all went through the Negro Ensemble Company. That is a part of the Nathan Bedford Forrest story. Black history is stranger than science fiction and better than Hollywood fiction. It is stranger than science fiction. Black history is stranger than science fiction and better than Hollywood movies. I shit you not. But yeah, so we will know tomorrow. We are going to do a vote with the Shelby County Historical Commission, and they will let us know if they approve of the wording for the proposed marker. So hopefully they will. I strongly believe they will get done. But it also costs money for these markers. This marker is going to cost $2,500 to do, and we all be is going to contribute our part to that. But we would love if if you have been appreciative of what you heard about the history of the Fort Pillow Massacre from yours truly. Please feel free to give in the super chat, give a donation via PayPal, or become a recurring supporter through Patreon.com. And all that stuff is in the subscription box, if I'm not mistaken. But they're going to take the vote tomorrow. And yeah, I just have a feeling that it will be approved because tomorrow is also the birthday or the life affirmation day of my late great maternal grandmother, Hattie Mae Taylor, one of the first black women to really believe in me. She predicted great things for me, and I look forward to honoring her predictions. But I lost her 20 years ago this year in May of 1998. I lost her right before I graduated, but she really believed in me. She was very encouraging, very warm. She really was my second mother. So I really think about her every day. But her birthday is tomorrow. And what a birthday gift it would be if we could honor the memories of the righteous ancestors. Because the reason why I knew about the Fort Pillow Massacre was because when I was in elementary school, when I was about 9 or 10 years old, I was staying on my grandma's house when my mom went to work, and I would, access her encyclopedias, her World Book encyclopedias. And she had a Black History World Book encyclopedia. I read that thing from front to back. That's how I learned about Medgar Evers and Fannie Lou Hamer and Paul Robeson and Burt Williams and Florence Mills. And that's how I learned about the Fort Pillow Massacre. Because I was also, one of my favorite movies at the time was the movie Glory, the true story. It's based on the true story of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the all-black regiment that were pioneers in making sure that black participation in the Civil War became a reality. Because you had almost 180,000 black folks participate as U.S. colored troops in the Civil War. About 40,000 died, But the battle cry for many of the U.S. colored troops for the remainder of the war was "Remember Fort Pillow," because those black soldiers recognized that it was a damn massacre, and they fought for their fallen brethren, in the memory of their fallen brethren. If it wasn't for black troop participation, U.S. colored troop participation, the Union would have lost the war. And that's what they don't want y'all to know. Some of the best soldiers are black people. We good at following directions. We good at dying for other people's objectives. But when it comes time, sometimes for our liberation, we fall short. When it comes time for our success, for us to be able to thrive, not just survive, but thrive, we fall short. That's got to change. But because these brothers were motivated by what happened to their brothers and sisters at Fort Pillow, they fought that gallant fight. They turned the tide of the war. And one of the regrets of the Confederacy was that they did not utilize the black soldier to the extent of the Union. But remember Fort Pillow, that was the battle cry. Just like when they was going into battle, John Brown's body is a martyr in the grave. John's brown body is a martyr in the grave. It was singing John's brown body. And John Brown was killed or assassinated by the state December 1859. And guess who attended the assassination or the execution of John Brown? John Wilkes Booth was in attendance at the execution of John Brown. He was dressed up as a soldier. He snuck in. John Wilkes Booth is from Baltimore. He was a part of famous Attn family. You know, his brother saved Todd Lincoln. Todd Lincoln, I believe, was about to fall off the subway platform in New York and get hit by a subway or something. But I mean, he was about to fall off the train platform. They ain't have subways or something. He was about to fall off a train platform in New York City. It was John Wilkes Booth's brother, his other famous Attn part of his family, who saved the life of Robert Todd Lincoln. He grabbed Robert Todd Lincoln and kept him from falling off that platform. And yet it was his brother, John Wilkes Booth, that killed Robert Todd Lincoln's father, Abraham Lincoln, the 16th U.S. president. I can't make this up. But John Wilkes Booth was present at the execution of John Brown. So, you know, you had the Union soldiers that were singing John Brown's body. Then you had the U.S. Colored Troops cry of "Remember Fort Pillow." Remember Fort Pillow. So tomorrow they're going to take a vote. Because I'm going to tell y'all something. Over 300 black people, soldiers, women, and children died at Fort Pillow. They were buried originally at Fort Pillow, but their remains were moved to the Memphis National Cemetery in 1867. What happened was that whatever remains they could find of the soldiers. So they were moving the bodies to Memphis, to the Memphis National Cemetery, and it was a real bad thunderstorm. So they wrote the names or identity of some of the soldiers on the coffin with chalk. And needless to say, with all that rain and stuff, the names washed off the coffins. And so they are currently buried to this day in unknown soldier plots. And it's only 109 cemetery plots. I want y'all to understand what I'm trying to say. There, we found 109 cemetery plots. I said it was over 300 people got killed. That's because you might have multiple remains in each plot because the bodies were so deteriorated about the time when they were moved to the Memphis National Cemetery because of the exposure to the elements out there in Fort Pillow. So you could have some women and children mix in with some of the remains of the soldiers in these 109 cemetery plots. Now, we did a tribute in honor of the Fort Pillow victims. We did a cemetery salute April 12th, 2016. But we was in the wrong part of the Memphis National Cemetery. We was in the wrong section, but we did a salute to them. I played taps, whatever you want to make of it. I played it. I even showed the part what I fucked up at. So, but it meant well. We had ASALA, the local ASALA chapter, Carter G. Woodson's organization, ASALA, the Association of African American Life, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. They participated in that. We had other groups participate as well. And it was beautiful. It's a beautiful gesture. But the next year we was able to find the exact location because in December 2016, a genealogist and researcher out in California, Lyndon Comstock, reached out to my mom and We All Be Group Incorporated, our nonprofit, and he showed us where the soldiers or the remains of the victims of Fort Pillow were actually buried. So last year we had a proper military funeral send-off. We were able to organize that with the Memphis Police Department and with other organizations, including Asylum. And my mom is a genius. She's an organizational genius, and she's the lead on this project. She is the reason why we're gonna get a marker for the ancestors at Memphis National Cemetery because her passion, her dedication. She's the vice president of the We All Be Group Incorporated, Sister Callie Hurd. So we had riderless horse, we had police escort, we had limousine service for the descendants of the victims and survivors of the Fort Pillow massacre. We had a 21 gun salute. We even had a Marine play taps. We had an African ceremony where we did libations for the ancestors. It was beautiful. We gave them the funeral service that they deserved 150 something years ago. We gave them a proper military funeral that they deserved 153 years ago. So even though it was 153 years late, we still arrive on time. So I just want y'all to know that, so when you support Brother Ron and We All Be News, you support you as well, because we all be in it to win it. Because We All Be stands for World Enriching, Activating, Liberating Love, Beautification Experience. And I help people, when you do what I do, you got to have a thick skin. You got to learn how to develop a thick skin. And I want to thank the ancestor Dick Gregory for being my drill sergeant in that matter. Because if I didn't go through the verbal ninjutsu and ass kickings that he gave me, I might not be able to do the work that I'm doing now. Because I'm an artist, I'm a sensitive soul, a sensitive being. And as an artist, as a creator, you got to be very protective of your personal space sometimes. But at the same time, you got to be open to the universe, and you also got to find a way to be protective of your personal space. So no, don't take it personal if I don't want to connect in a way. Cause I be having people say, well, Brother Ron, let's meet in the Ozarks at a truck stop. I don't even know who the fuck you are. I don't know if you're the feds. I don't know who you are. You know what I'm saying? Let's meet online first. Let's have a meeting of the minds online. You know what I'm saying? Let's exchange information that way. Let me get to know you and you get to know me. But I'm not all in trying to meet everybody. You gotta have a spirit of discernment. But I'll meet you where you at in the land of ideas. Okay. We could meet like that for now. I'm not gonna meet everybody, and I don't have no problem saying that. But yeah. So, but at the same time, this work, I'm doing my God work. It don't make sense to everybody, but to those who make sense to, please receive the information. It comes from a very good and genuine place. That's all I'm saying. Receive the information because it comes from a genuine and sincere place. If something I said don't sit right with you, do your due diligence and research for yourself. Use this gift called the internet and make your own way through it. And feel free to contact Brother Ron. Feel free to correct Brother Ron, but know that Brother Ron does not need to have my truth validated by your ignorance. So don't be ignorant and come at me. Come at me with some information. And who knows, we might end up working together because I got a special MLK 50 project coming up. It will be live stream, and y'all should support that because it will have some of your favorites. I ain't gonna say nobody's names, but y'all probably know who I'm talking about. And also introduce y'all to some new people and new perspectives about what happened to Dr. King 50 years ago. Because I'm gonna have my event on April the 5th, the day after. Because everybody making this big ado about April 4th. For me, it's the day after. Because April 4th is the shocker. Who knew? But it's the day after. I want to do with the aftermath. Like Dr. Dre, the aftermath. I've been there. I done that. But I want to deal with the aftermath of what happened April 4th. And I want to have a constructive community dialogue. But yeah, people, sometimes we all be, why you got that name? It's World Enriching, Activating, Liberating Love, Beautification Experience. I was actually inspired by the great Sun Ra to come up with the name We All Be. Because I remember looking at a documentary and researching Sun Ra. He said that UFOs kidnapped him. And I'm thinking he from the South. He from Alabama. I'm thinking it was the Klan that kidnapped him. But let's go along with the fact He said he's from Saturn, he's not from Birmingham, and that it's not the Klan, but it's UFOs. I'll go along with that. He said the UFOs kidnapped him, and they told him they would let him go if he teach the world how to love beautiful things. And so I thought that was cool because I love Sun Ra. He was a beautiful person, a beautiful mind, a beautiful spirit. Listen to his music. It would do you so much good because it's healing in the vibrations of Sun Ra music. There's healing. It can hit, music can heal or it can destroy. And then what we don't understand, we keep on thinking that the music that's being produced now is not harmful. It's very harmful. They have killed musicians over their music because the potential of the music. John Lennon was assassinated because he's going to use his music to heal the world, to imagine peace and make it real. That's why they killed John Lennon. And Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix was a big contributor to the Black Panther Party. People don't even know that. People think of Jimi Hendrix, they think of rock and roll and white people. Jimi Hendrix was very conscious. They got you thinking that Jimi Hendrix was a drug addict. He was not a drug addict. I talked to people that worked with Jimi Hendrix and knew him. He was the type of dude, he called his band The Experience because he was all about experimentation. So he might try a thing once or twice, but he did not get hooked to that thing. Like, let me try that. Okay, all right. Keep it moving. But Jimi Hendrix was very political. And he was a big contributor or supporter of the Black Panther Party. He brought their paper on a consistent basis. There's a documentary that came out just a couple of years after Jimi Hendrix passed that interviewed people that knew him. Like, Jimi Hendrix worked for everybody. Before he became Jimi Hendrix, he was the backup guitarist for the Isley Brothers, for Little Richard, Little Richard, Tutti Frutti. He played for Sam Cooke, all types of people. All types of people. And then he found himself homeless for 6 weeks up in New York. He was living in the alley, you know. The only thing that kept him warm was a winter coat that was given to him by his best friend and bandmate, Larry Lee, who's from Memphis. See, Jimi Hendrix and Larry Lee met in Nashville. Jimi Hendrix was a Screaming Eagle, 101st Airborne. He was stationed in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Jimi Hendrix was jumping out of airplanes for the U.S. government, for the U.S. military. A lot of people don't know that. 101st Airborne Screaming Eagles. He moved to Nashville, which is not far from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and started gigging at the clubs. That's where he met Larry Lee, a cat from Memphis, who was in Nashville because he was going to Tennessee State on a baseball scholarship. He went to Hamilton High School near Soulsville in Memphis. So they became friends. They gigged. So when you had people like Aretha Franklin and Curtis Mayfield and the Impressions will come to town, and all these great R&B soul acts, they will be the backup band for these people. So Larry Lee was drafted into Vietnam, and before he left, he gave Jimi Hendrix his winter coat. So that's the only thing that kept him kind of warm those 6 weeks when he was homeless in New York City before he made his big debut in England. See, what's funny about that is that Jimi Hendrix had to go to England to become famous, and the Beatles and Rolling Stones had to go to America to make it big. You know, because B.B. King, when he was asked about the impact of the Beatles, he said all they did was re-import the blues, because B.B. King and Willie Dixon, they all can recall a time when they would visit England and be in Piccadilly Square, and you have a broke and destitute John Lennon or Paul McCartney, getting these lessons on how to play the blues from these blues masters from America who are not appreciated by their own country. So they were showing them things on guitar, how to sing, and they incorporated that into their acts. Same thing with Little Richard. Went overseas and had a big concert over, had a big tour over in Europe. He had the Rolling Stones and the Beatles open for him. He told them they could not cover his songs, but they could do their thing. So they had the blessing of Little Richard to be his opening acts, the Beatles and Rolling Stones. But yet people go crazy over the Beatles and Rolling Stones. People show no love really for Little Richard or for a Fats Domino or for Chuck Berry. These are the rock gods, not Little Richard. Not Rolling Stone, not the Beatles, not Queen. Not any other white rock group you think of. I don't care how good you like, how good their lyrics are in songs. They are not the king of this shit. They got their stuff from the black people. Rolling Stone, the Rolling Stones are named after the Muddy Waters song. Muddy Waters from Coahoma, Mississippi. Coahoma County, Mississippi. Stovall Plantation. Rolling Stones got their name from a Muddy Waters song. Same thing with Rolling Stone magazine. They all got their shit from Muddy Waters. A lot of people don't know who Muddy Waters really was and his impact on the game. So all they did was reimport the blues. But yeah, so this is why it's so important to have shows about like this, that we talk about things like this. We All Be. It's important to support these type of shows, especially We All Be, you know. So feel free to support. You know, don't be scared. Don't be scared. Support us because we support y'all. So y'all not gonna get this information. Who gonna tell y'all about Sun Ra? Who in black media talks about Sun Ra and Jimi Hendrix and tell y'all some things y'all might not even be aware of? See, my thing is I want to feed my people because my people, the people who listen to me, who really listen to what I do and appreciate what I do, they are hungry for knowledge. They are hungry. I feed my people because people be hungry, and I plan for y'all to take these seeds of information and plant them and manifest an alternative reality to the bullshit that they be giving y'all. Because right now they force feeding us bullshit. And now's the time to rise up and say, enough is enough, God damn it. It's time to take it back. It's time to take it back. So I'm looking forward. I mean, We All Be is going to play a big role. Like, this 4-Pillow Massacre marker is a big deal. It is a big deal to me. But if you can help us in raising money to put this bad boy up, you know what I'm saying? It's $2,500 total, but whatever you could give to the We All Be platform can help assist in the raising up of funds for that. And like I said, we're doing real work out here. I'm not selling you no pipe dream. I'm not selling you a shortcut to riches. I'm telling you that, you know thyself, learn thyself, love thyself. Know thyself, learn thyself. I said, know thyself, learn thyself, love thyself. That's what it's all about. Let me see. I'm sorry, I haven't been paying attention really. I haven't been paying attention all to the chat room. Let me go in the chat room and pay attention. Because I have not been paying attention. I have not been paying attention. I've been a bad boy. I know y'all saying some interesting things in there. And thank y'all once again for supporting this podcast. It's very important. It's good information out here. I'm really digging live streaming now. The more I do it, the better I get at it. And I add more things to it. But I'm glad that people are really benefiting from this dissemination of information. I'm glad y'all really are benefiting from it. So I'm gonna read some of the chat room stuff. I think you just noticed you're going to subscribe to the Patreon. I appreciate that. Every little bit helps. Every little bit helps. Have I done an ancestry DNA test? I haven't done it yet, Spirit of Justice. I may or may not do it, but I am going to research my ancestry because I know I'm related to Curtis Mayfield. I know that on my grandma's side, my maternal grandmother's side. Not maternal, but paternal grandmother's side. Thank you, John Crowder. You know, you said, yes, sir. That's why I will be getting your t-shirt and your pictures in your book. We got to support the people that support us. Like I'm producing things to support my people, to help my people have some pride in themselves, because it's so important that we believe in ourselves, because to believe in yourself is to change the trajectory of your life. Thank you. I received a salute. Just noticed. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chris Jackson, for receiving. I'm glad this platform has benefited people like you because I'm still getting used to the idea of people recognizing me on the streets. I had a sister yesterday when I was at an event. She said, "You must be Brother Ron. My son has told me all about you. He said he's a big fan of yours. He's in Atlanta, Georgia. I go to places like L.A. I remember I was in L.A. Near the USC campus in Los Angeles, and I was talking to a white friend from college. And I told him, you see them two black people sitting next to us? I bet they know about We All Be and Brother Run and what we do. He said, okay. And I engaged the black people, and the sister was beautiful. She was gorgeous. Like she was Ethiopian or something, but she was American. She's a black American. She was gorgeous. And I guess her boyfriend, and the boyfriend knew who I was. He said, oh yeah, man, I'm gonna have to turn you on to this. He told his female friend, I'm gonna have to turn you on to We All Be and Brother Run because there's a kid that talks to Dick Gregory and Judge Brown, all them guys. So I mean, it's Los Angeles. And I remember I was in Baba Dick Gregory's funeral. People shot me out, said, we need you up in Harlem, Brother Ron. I mean, that's cool because it's not really about me. It's good to be recognized, but it's even better to be recognized for doing the work that has benefited people, that have touched people's lives. So I'm very thankful for those people out there for believing. Oh, thank you, Sister Barbara Williams. You are a true supporter. We love you madly. You have my art hanging in your living room and bedroom. Everyone loves it. Yeah, you brought it. You better love it. I'm glad you love it. And thank you for supporting. I mean, you are a godsend. Dick and Blue said, Brother Ron, when and where is the next fundraiser dinner going to be? Well, I don't know where was the first one was at, but we could work on it because we definitely got to get into fundraising. Like I said, I got a nonprofit 501c3. I have not done the best job in promoting that, but now I am in the mood to try to promote these things because we need money. We got to have a better relationship with money. I don't have no problem with money. Like I listen to a lot of Reverend Ike. I don't know y'all hip to Reverend Ike. Y'all should Google Reverend Ike. He died in 2009. But I remember, like I said, my grandma's birthday, my maternal grandmother's birthday is tomorrow, February the 8th. And she died 20 years ago this year in May before I graduated from high school. And I can't believe I've been out of high school for almost 20 years. But Reverend, when we cleaned out her bedroom, we found out these little small red cloths. And she got these from Reverend Ike, these prayer cloths. And what I realized about my grandmother is that she dressed well. She didn't really think she was a beautiful woman, but she was gorgeous. She was a gorgeous woman, had a beautiful spirit and a generous spirit. And she was the type of woman that she would never be short on money. Like people would ask her to borrow money or to have money, and she had it. And she was still able to pay the bills and maintain the household. So she had a strong faith. And I believe that, her faith was represented by those prayer cloths we found all over her room. She had them everywhere. And she had a coin from Reverend Ike that I still keep to this day that says, from the biblical, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. So I got that coin that I keep with me as I travel. And my grandma, she was a praying woman. She believed. I mean, she was a Christian. I mean, she went to church. She did the Jesus stuff, but she had some powerful spirit about her. She really had a healing spirit about her. It's been situations in my family where her presence and her putting hands on people have caused people to come out of whatever they was going through. I mean, I don't think she appreciated who she really was. I don't think she knew her own strength or value. But I breathe out gets to say is that Reverend Ike was talking about, you believing in yourself. He was talking about black folks. We need to believe in ourselves. We need to know that you don't need no middleman to talk to God, that you got a personal connection to the universe, to the creator. And he was talking about when you say I am, you are identifying your godliness. So when you say I am rich, you can manifest these things. It's about metaphysics. But also when you say I am poor, I am broke, you gotta be careful what you say because your words create worlds, right? Don't speak things over yourself that are not meant for your betterment, that is meant for your detriment and destruction. So it's very important that we be mindful of the things we say about stuff, but also about ourselves. Yeah, I know we talked about this before about the slave ship being named Jesus. This ain't about Jesus though. This is about people believing in themselves and respecting their godliness within. Pie in the sky. Yeah, he was against the pie in the sky. He want his now. Like Reverend Ike said, ain't about the pie in the sky. I want mine's now. Because people would ask him, Reverend Ike, you believe in heaven? He said, I believe in the now. I want it now. He was talking about how a lot of us chase away money from us because we say stuff like money is the root of evil when it's the love of money that's root of evil. But Reverend Ike will say it's the lack of money that's the root of evil. This spirit of lacking, being lack, like there's a shortage on everything. Like this system will have you believe that there is a limit on everything. But if you are in your true God self, you know there's abundance. There's this opportunity waiting to be manifested by you. You create your luck. You create your opportunities. It's on you. Yes, just notice he talked about not waiting for your eyes to close to see heaven. That's right. He talking about living it now, like the white folks do. They're not waiting to heaven to get their shoes and stuff and have their mansions and pie in the sky. As Sister Williams said, they want their stuff now. White folks, the Vatican got all their shit now. They got all their stuff now. Vatican City. They said they got a library underground that's miles and miles long with expensive stuff, with all types of artifacts. They're not waiting for no mystery God to give them stuff. They're getting stuff now. Yeah, life and death. And Mary Moulton is right. Life and death lies in the tongue. So be careful what you say about yourself. You know, because there's a difference between being broke and being poor. You know, don't have that poverty mindset. A lot of us have that poverty spirit. You know, we just live in the spirit of lackingness. You know, we lack. We love to lack. We love to struggle. I don't like the struggle, but I know sometimes that struggle with an objective is necessary to achieve goals. Struggle with an objective, with an agenda, is necessary to achieve. Yeah, because all this stuff about loss and attraction, that becomes from us. We black folks. We're a very special group of people. We spiritual people. And thank you, Dark Matter, for receiving the history. But do your research. Just don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for it. Take a look. It's all online. Lincoln was killed because of Freeman's Bank. Yeah, Lincoln was killed because he was messing around with the currency. Just like JFK was killed because of currency issues. Both of these guys were killed. They were shot in the head in public. Andrew Jackson, one thing, good thing I could say about Andrew Jackson, the president who's currently on a $20 bill, is that he took on the banks. He knew the threat of a central bank. He knew the threats of the Rothschild. And they tried to kill Andrew Jackson in the White House. And the gun misfired twice or three times. And Andrew Jackson almost killed the guy who tried to kill him. He was so enraged. But Andrew Jackson took on the banks and he won. Did Booth act alone? I don't think John Wilkes Booth act alone. I don't think nobody acts alone. I don't believe in lone gunman theories. It's always a conspiracy. Yeah, John Wilkes Booth pulled the trigger, but did John? It's a lot of stuff to that because John Wilkes Booth allegedly had a diary, and the diary was given to Secretary of War Edward Stanton, and Edward Stanton ended up becoming a Supreme Court justice, but he died in 1869. And I believe he had that diary in his possession, but there were pages. There were some important pages missing from that diary. And some people believe that the person that was killed in that barn fire was not John Wilkes Booth, but a double. Somebody who was a double that looked like John Wilkes Booth. And that John Wilkes Booth actually survived killing Abraham Lincoln. He lived to be an old man. Now you look all this stuff up online and make what you make of it. You know, like Dick Gregory used to say that John D. Rockefeller was Frank James of the James Gang. You know, but there are sources that said that John D. Rockefeller and Jesse James were cousins. It's like they said that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are cousins. So it's interesting to think about because both the Rockefellers and the Jameses were involved in money, right? One way or the other, they were robbing the people one way or the other. So yeah, during the war, the Civil War, they were using greenbacks. Abraham Lincoln decided to print his own money so they could control the inflation. They didn't want to get all that interest they had to pay back to the banks. So he did some greenbacks. And like I tell people, you want to look at some conspiracy theories, check out the Knights of the Golden Circle. That's the Southern Fried Illuminati. I call them the Southern Fried Illuminati. And they got Civil War connections. Yes, the government is still gangster. Another thing, sometimes people, I say slaves and slave African prisoners of war, they still were victims of this system. They still were exploited by the system. It don't really bother me if you say slaves or enslaved Africans or prisoners of war. What bothers me is when people say, 50 years after Dr. King got killed, we still asking the question, where do we go from here? That speaks to cowardice. That speaks to a cowardice in the people. And like I said before, the closer we were to revolution in this country recently was not the 1960s, but the 1930s. And I want y'all to really research the 1930s. Research that, because 1930s gave us the Teamsters. They gave us Jimmy Hoffa. Because you know who made Jimmy Hoffa? It wasn't the mob. It wasn't the Teamsters. It was Kroger's. Kroger's made Jimmy Hoffa. You can research that. There's some documentaries on Jimmy Hoffa, some well done documentaries on Jimmy Hoffa, but he took on Kroger's before he took on the Kennedys or anybody else. Jimmy Hoffa had a face off in labor striking with Kroger's, the grocery chain. So, Aboriginal Leo said, you can't trace your family records before the late 1800s. They destroyed them to hide the truth. Doc Marta said, everything in this country has always been black and white. And also, Doc Marta said, my brother, there's a scam to keep our people believing that we came from Africa. We are the original people of America. And I repeat, we are not from Africa. Well, I see it both ways. I see it that, yes, we could be the original people of America, but also the original people of America could have came from Africa. What's the problem with that? I believe that slavery actually happened. I don't believe it was a myth. It's like I believe that Nat Turner was a real person. Because some people believe that Nat Turner never existed. I've been down to Southampton, Virginia. It's like Gabriel Prosser. He was a real person. This guy was before Nat Turner, but he died the same year Nat Turner was born. Y'all should check out Gabriel Prosser, the general. He wanted to lead an insurrection in Virginia. Somebody said, where do you go to learn about Mississippi? You go to Mississippi, or you can go online. I mean, the internet has made the world small, but there's a lot of great things you should check out in Mississippi. Like I said, the second Grammy Museum, there's two Grammy. The Grammys is the highest award you can win in music, right? In American music industry, whatever. The Grammys has a museum down in the Mississippi Delta because Mississippi, from my understanding, has produced more Grammy winners than any place in the country. Excuse me, Mississippi has produced more Grammy winners than any place in the country, according to something I heard. I'm about to research that. But you know what's strange? I just came from Clarksdale, Mississippi, and Clarksdale, Mississippi produced the likes of Sam Cooke, John Lee Hooker, Ike Turner, Rick Ross the rapper, Nate Dogg, smoke weed every day. They produced some phenomenal giants in R&B, soul, and hip hop. And yet, when I went down to Clarksdale, on 4 poles, I seen the caricatures of the Beatles. Why you got John, Paul, George, and Ringo on these poles when you could have Robert Johnson face on the poles, who lived in Clarksdale for for a minute. Or you can have Muddy Waters' face on the poles. You can have John Lee Hooker's face, Ike Turner's face. Why the Beatles, of all people, in prominent places and spaces in Clarksdale? You know, it's fascinating. Okay, Dre, PC technician, you said the same people who want to say no part of Africa, the same people who want no part of Africa are the same people that are saying slavery didn't happen. Yes, I don't see why people have a problem with understanding that we do have a connection to Africa, but at the same time, we are the original people. Because everywhere you go in the world, you see an African presence. Fred Daggs, you said I listened to Sun Ra. That guy was something else. I encourage everybody who listens to me to listen to Sun Ra. I agree with you, John Crowder, brother Crowder. If they don't believe you, all they have to do is research music that heals the body. Exactly. Well, you got to think about it. You trying to trace your ancestry. We were not considered human beings. We were, like the Constitution said, we 3/5 human beings. We were property. So you might have to go through the property records of some of this people that own slaves in this country. Go through the property records. I don't know, go to the National Archives. But we were considered property. We were not considered human beings. So we up there with the cattle and stuff. We won the first commodities trade on Wall Street. Enslaved black folk. I mean, Beatles became famous because the white establishment want them to be famous. And I talk about how the Beatles was used, that they really was like an MK Ultra thing with the Beatles, because the American public was not buying the lone gunman theory on the Kennedy assassination, which happened in 63. So the Beatles were introduced to the public in 1964. And John Lennon talked about how they were being used to promote drug use among the youth culture. You know, look up the Tavistock Institute. Tavis, like Tavis, and stock was Tavistock. The Tavistock Institute. I believe that the Beatles were a product of the Tavistock Institute, because John Lennon called in Dick Gregory to help him detox from drugs. And he told Dick a lot of things about the music industry, how it was wicked and filthy. And John Lennon was a threat to the establishment because he was anti-war and pro-peace. So he wanted to use his artistry to promote peace and love. And he was a threat. Just like Dr. King was a threat to the establishment. Just like Huey Long was a threat to the establishment when they wanted to share the wealth. Have everybody have a living wage. Yes, Sister Barbara Williams, we deeper than we know. This is why it's Black History Month. A lot of people don't know that about Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix was no fool. But his his manager was MI6. His manager was British intelligence. So think about that. I just told y'all that Jimi Hendrix was big into supporting the Black Panther Party, and that his agent was MI6, British intelligence. And his agent died just several years after him under questionable circumstances. Because what I gathered, Jimi Hendrix did not die in the bed choking off his vomit. He was killed in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. He was alive and they killed him in the ambulance. That's what people say from different sources. I'm not saying that, but it's something to be looked into. Thank you, Fred Daggs. Get that painting, man. Yeah, I like red light. Thank you, sister. I received the love from Atlanta. Atlanta loves Brother Ron. Thank you. Most history is made up. Well, Brother Aboriginal, a lot of history is propaganda. So propaganda is meant to serve a purpose, an agenda. So you got to be able to discern the truth for yourself, because there's a lot of stuff that people don't know and they don't want you to know. Because like Harry Truman once said, the only thing that's new is the history you don't know. And there's a lot of alternate histories, a lot of alternate things, narratives that need to be resurrected once more in the minds and the consciousness of the people, so the people could actually have a choice. And that's why 2018 is such a pivotal year, because this is the year where everything is getting exposed, but we don't know how to discern those truth and learn how to seek knowledge out of a lie. Then you're gonna be left behind. You're gonna still be bamboozled and led astray. But the truth is hiding right in plain sight. It's right out there. But we got to develop our discernment and our God eye, our God third eye to get it. 7 years a slave, my ear is right. I'm trying to see. I'm sorry. I'm just reading. Sister Anne Marie Mosey said you watched the movie Goodbye Uncle Tom, and it was such a trip. Yeah, it's a crazy. It's like cognitive dissonance looking at that movie Goodbye Uncle Tom, but looking at the director's cut, the long version. I only look at it once and I couldn't look at it no more. Okay, Turtle. I mean, we get into that, but my purpose, like Dr. John Henry Clark said, history is like a clock. It tells you what time it is now. So what good is it to know some of the things that people that y'all are saying in the chat room? What good is it to know these things if you don't know how to apply it to your current life to elevate yourself and other people to a higher level of existence, to a better quality of life? Roots was make believe. Nat Turner is open to debate. I guess, you know, cause I've been to Southampton, Virginia, and also Southampton, Virginia is where Dred Scott is from. The infamous Dred Scott decision, where the Supreme Court said that a black man, that the descendants of Dred Scott have no rights that a white man is bound to respect. Yeah, there's lots of they're gonna talk about, and they blame it on ancient aliens. They don't want to give black folks credit for anything. They always talk about some ancient aliens and stuff like that. So it's real deep. It's real deep. It's real deep. And Camp Van Dorn, Mississippi, that's real deep too. Like I talked about earlier about the World War II veterans, not World War II veterans, but the black GIs that were slaughtered. Some say over 1,000 black GIs were slaughtered late fall of 1943 down in Camp Van Dorn, Mississippi during World War II. And it would not be unusual for that to happen, because we know the history of this wicked country. We know about the East St. Louis riots of 1917. Well, they weren't riots, it was the East St. Louis race war and massacre of 1917. We know about the fact that we are approaching the 100th anniversary of the A.L.L race massacre in A.L.L, Arkansas. Over there in Arkansas, where they said you had over 1,000 black people slaughtered, and all these black people were doing was trying to organize a union for sharecroppers to keep from being economically exploited by the white business people. And the white folks shot up a church. There was a union meeting going on of sharecroppers. This was started the A.L.L race massacre of 1919. You had a group of brothers, the Johnston brothers. These were famous black men, well-off black men, professional black men, were slaughtered by white supremacists, as y'all call them. They were slaughtered. You know, you had black people being thrown in the Mississippi River, buried in mass graves. You had the National Guard. You know, you had people killing black folks wholesale. And yet, when you read about the Elaine Race massacre or the Elaine Race riot today, they act like it was just a handful of people were killed and injured. But if you read the testimony of the times of the survivors, even there were dead bodies everywhere down in Elaine, Arkansas. And I interviewed two people close to that case who wrote books about it, who did documentaries on it. It's on our We All Be TV channel. Just search Elaine, Arkansas, and those interviews will pop up about what happened, because it was not a riot, it was a massacre and a race war. I'm not familiar with the Marcus Houston story. That's why y'all here. Y'all gotta, educate the people. Are we ready for the collapse of the dollar? The dollar been dead. You know what I'm saying? It's over, man. This whole thing is an illusion, man. It's basically over, and the people don't know it. It's just crazy out here. But I'm glad that I'm able to reach you all out here, and thank you for supporting the movement. I think I'm gonna spend the last couple of minutes or moments talking about Camp Van Dorn. And it was a book, like I said, written by a white guy uh, named Carol Case. He allegedly got the story from I want to say it was a janitor, either a janitor or security guard that worked at his bank back in the late 80s, told him the story of the Camp Van Dorn massacre, which allegedly was, the massacre of over a thousand black GIs at Camp Van Dorn in southern Mississippi back in the fall of 1943. The alleged janitor was a MP, military police, and he said he partook, he played a part in the massacre, in the execution, the assassination of over 1,000 GIs of color, and that they stacked their bodies into railroad cars to destinies unknown or destination unknown. So I want to talk a little bit about that because, like I said, the U.S. military took the allegations seriously. The book came out, it created a storm of controversy, and the U.S. military looked into it. But to me, they half-assed it because they didn't really put boots on the ground, as they say, to investigate, down in Camp Van Dorn area. So they were forced by U.S. Representative Benny Thompson and the NAACP to do another investigation. But around that time, that's when September 11 happened, and so I haven't heard anything since that time about Camp Van Dorn. After September 11 happened, it changed everything, and America's priorities were focused somewhere else. But the History Channel, they did a 1 hour special on Camp Van Dorn massacre. It's on YouTube. There's YouTube. I guess Camp Van Dorn or Camp Van Dorn massacre, and it's a 1 hour special that the History Channel did some years ago. And my thing is this: I also found a website. These producers did some segments for a local Jackson news station back in 2001. They did a series where they interviewed locals and other folks who said that the Camp Van Dorn thing actually happened. They said they heard about the stories of what happened to the black GIs at Camp Van Dorn. Some of these people were children. Some of these people, they were working on the base, and one was even a black GI stationed at the base named Malcolm Laplace, who since has passed along. I think he's been dead for over 10 years. But their testimonies are also available online as well. And I mean, I think people should really look into this because something happened down there. I don't know if it was 1,000, I don't know if it was 1,000 people that got killed. I don't know if it was a handful, but there was a soldier who was killed by the sheriff at the gate of the base. Like the sheriff shot him in cold blood, from my understanding. So we know that one black GI was killed by police, a form of police brutality down in at Camp Van Dorn. So this should be looked upon as something serious. I think y'all should check it out and hold the government accountable for doing the research, because it's like we don't practice follow through like we should. Like we look into something, something gets our attention, we have all this emotion, we have all these movements going on, protests, all this stuff, name calling, all these things, and then everything dies down, and we don't have a true resolution to the issue. We don't get a true resolution out of it. So this is the problem. I mean, this is why people talk about revolution. How can you have revolution when you don't take what you do seriously? When you begging instead of demanding. A lot of us confuse begging with demanding. If you in a revolutionary spirit, you don't beg, you demand. If your demand's not met, you try another alternative. Like Malcolm says, by any means necessary. And even when people say that now, they so damn afraid they gotta walk it back. I mean, people say, now I don't mean necessarily like in it. No, if you really meant what you said, there's no need to clarify. There's no need to explain. There's no need for an asterisk. Just stand by what you say. Oh yeah, Camp Van Dorn is interesting. I'm gonna try to find posts in the chat room, the websites where you can see the interviews I talked about, because they're like hidden. You know what I'm saying? You gotta know what you're looking for to find these interviews, because they're not on YouTube. They're on a special website. And it's worth looking to. But most of the stuff about Camp Van Dorn, okay, it's called the Unexplained Files. That's the name of the series on this local Jackson news station. The guy who was the lead reporter on this, he's now working in Kansas. But I wanted to provide the link to the website. It's called the Unexplained Files. And y'all can look through it. It got several videos. You got to look through it. They have several videos, throughout. But the updates seem to stop in 2001, right before September 11th. I'm typing this up, and I go get that, the Unexplained Files. Like, once again, I want to encourage you all to do your own research. Just don't take my word for it, right? Do your own research, figure this stuff out, and come to your own conclusions. But now my understanding, some people believe that there was no massacre at Camp Van Dorn. Some people believe that the soldiers were shipped to Alaska for the rest of the war as a punishment for being rowdy and non-compliant to the leadership. Because a lot of these men, a lot of these black GIs were at first stationed out in Arizona. And then they had a thing, I guess they call it the Thanksgiving riot, where the black GIs got into a shootout with the MPs in a town in Arizona. It had some casualties. But I'm gonna read something about Camp Van Dorn from the Unexplained Files. I put a link in the chat room. I'm gonna read a little short synopsis. Is it possible that the United States Army could kill their own men? The Army says no, but others said the massacre of black soldiers did happen at Camp Van Dorn in Centerville, Mississippi. I believe there was a massive cover up by the United States Army, says Malcolm LaPlace, a former member of the 364th Infantry. He was regimental headquarters clerk responsible for typing the day's journal. He says he came across an important piece of evidence. And I read the entire text before typing it. About midway down, I read this: 20 enlisted men of the 364th Infantry Regiment were found murdered in Centerville, Mississippi last night. An investigation is underway. Moments later, his superior, Colonel John Goodman, made LaPlace change his entry. He came back out, handed me it, and said, "Retype this, Sergeant." And I got down to the 20 enlisted men of the 364th Infantry Regiment were reported AWOL last night in Centerville, Mississippi. An investigation underway. LaPlace said he was told to change records 3 other times about black soldiers being AWOL instead of murdered. This is how he came up with 36 black soldiers being murdered. The Army says journal entries aren't a credible source of information. The regimental journal isn't the most important record that would have reflected change in status like that, says Lieutenant Colonel Charles Graw. That would have been reflected in our morning reports, and we saw nothing of the kind. LaPlace responses, or LaPlace response, excuse me. The colonel is wrong. The journal entries reflected dates and times and occurrences in that regiment at Camp Van Dorn, Mississippi. He is lying, period. The Army knows that LaPlace was a member of the 364th. According to LaPlace, they have documents he signed in 1942. LaPlace says those documents are falsified. How do you use my signature over a document in 1942 when I did not enter the service until March 3rd, 1943? LaPlace believes the Army's inaccuracies prove their investigation has holes in it. Congressman Benny Thompson agrees. The fact that reports were submitted in the name of a clerk who was not even in the Army at that time raises questions. Thompson has been skeptical about the Army's investigation since the beginning. One part of the Army's investigation was based on the testimony of former 364th soldiers. Another soldier they didn't speak with was Corporal Anthony J. Snively. Snively spoke with us off camera. He told us that a mass shooting did not happen, but he says the black soldiers were treated harshly. In 1943, Snively wrote several letters to a black newspaper in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, talking about violence against black soldiers. These letters were documents used in Carol Kaye's book, The Slaughter. Here is where the story takes a twist. Mr. Snively told us the first and last paragraphs I wrote, the middle ones I did not. He goes on to say, I wrote the letters in pencil, not on a typewriter. The middle paragraphs are a fabrication. Also, Snively's name is spelled incorrectly as Smurley. Since these letters were declassified documents, Snively wonders if the Army confiscated them and they never made it to Philadelphia. Author Carol Kaye says down a gravel road on what used to be Camp Van Dorn property is a man-made lake. Below the waters of that lake is the final resting place for 1,227 black soldiers. We'll talk with the family that owns this mystery spot and find out what they know about having the dead bodies of black soldiers allegedly under their lake. So I read that, but I put a link in the box. Y'all can start looking at the videos. White folks locally said that something happened. And this white dude that wrote the book I tried to interview Carol Case. He agreed for me to interview him back in 2010 or 2011, but then he canceled the interview at the last minute. He said he would be okay with me interviewing him. But there's the documentary that the History Channel did. It features him, and also that page I provided got links to interviews, video interviews. Like Malcolm LaPlace, he died maybe like 10 or 11 years ago. But even he said that something was wrong, that something happened. And he talks about himself, because I think he ended up working at Stanford University. He was a very smart brother. He was originally from Louisiana, but I read things where he said he was in fear of his own life. Like a lot of the GIs, black GIs, were afraid to leave their barracks to use the restroom at night because they believed that the military police would shoot them in cold blood. So they found another way to use the restroom to relieve themselves that did not require them to leave their sleeping quarters. So what happened? The author said, Carol Case said, that these 1,227 remains could be found underneath a man-made lake, a man-made lake down in Centerville, Mississippi, on the former property of Kemp Van Dorn. Now, the newsman, they interviewed like locals who lived there. I don't know if they still living, but on this website, they got the video interviews of white folks that said that something happened to a lot of black soldiers down there. You know, you go by military records and whatnot. Some of these records could be incomplete. I know that there was a fire that you know in St. Louis where they were keeping a lot of World War II records of veterans. And so, I mean, you know, you got to ask yourself your question: if that many black folks were killed, did the families have any inquiries? Like, why did the family not ask about what happened to their loved ones? Were they given some false bullshit by the government? Now we know this can actually happen. Cover-ups are not new to our government. I interviewed Dr. Johnson, who was the father of Private First Class Lavina Johnson. She was the first woman from Missouri to die in the Iraqi war. At first, they said she committed suicide, but come to find out, she was murdered, and it was a cover up by the military because the bullet that killed her came from either a military officer or a high level contractor, because she was raped and murdered, and then the tent where her body was located was set on fire, but the fire was put out. And so when the family received the body, they saw that she had her military gloves, her white gloves, glued to her hands. And you saw how her face looked really busted, because they said that she used this big, cumbersome military weapon to shoot herself in the head. If that was the case, the weapon they said she used, she wouldn't have had a head left. You know, but come to find out that she was in a fight with an attacker, that she had broken, you know, she had bruises and whatnot on her face, and that there was a corrosive liquid poured in her vaginal area to kill any semen or DNA evidence. So the family they did a second autopsy on her body. So the father found out what really happened to his daughter. But here's a guy whose family has spent generations in U.S. military service. He was an Army clinical psychologist, I believe, for 30-something years. But his daughter, he didn't want his daughter to go into military service, but she wanted to go into military service to support her dream of working in the, I think, film industry, the Hollywood film industry. So she wanted to make enough money to work to get a degree or college degree to help her get into movies. And what strange was, she signed up for the Army, and they told her, according to her father, that she would not be shipped overseas. But what people don't understand, once you sign to the military, you don't own your body. You become you a slave to you a property of Uncle Sam. You are the property of Uncle Sam. You have no rights as a human being. They own you. Because once you sign your name on a dotted line, Uncle Sam's, he owns you. You no longer an individual citizen. You are property of the U.S. military, of the U.S. government. That means they could do anything to you. They could send you anywhere. You could die for anything they want you to die for. I mean, I read a statistic some years ago. It might be different now. They said 1 out of 3 females in the U.S. military is sexually assaulted, and 1 out of 5 males in the military, in the U.S. military, are sexually assaulted. So that's a high level number. This is not the enemy doing this. This is so-called friends. Friends with forced benefits without consent. You had at one point a high number of females committing suicide. They were committing suicide after they accused officers, their superiors, of committing sexual acts against them. One woman even wrote her family that if she ended up committing suicide, that means she was murdered, because I think she reported her commanding officer raping her or having an improper relationship with her. So people don't understand the U.S. military is good at cover up. So something could have happened. They could have had over 1,200 black soldiers killed at Camp Van Dorn without, raising an eyebrow. They cover it up. And people don't ask the right type of questions, you won't get the right kind of answers. And let me look at some other places. But I just want to put that on y'all mind, the Camp Van Dorn massacre, because there's not a lot of new information out there about it. But it's up to us to demand answers for things that could have happened. And if it didn't happen, I'm glad it didn't happen. But if it did happen, that's another reason why black folks are owed reparations. Because I remember hearing about back in the 1940s, they were finding the bodies of black GIs in the waterways of Mississippi. You had a whole bunch of black GIs, a bunch of black military men turning up dead in Mississippi back in the 1940s in their uniforms. They were found in lakes and rivers and stuff. And what happened was, it was a local activist named MOOR, who's really an unsung civil rights activist. He also worked as a mailman, and he owned his own businesses. He was an entrepreneur and a mailman, and I want to say he was a veteran. And so he wrote the State Department about all these black GIs being found in Mississippi dead under questionable circumstances. Soon as he wrote that letter, the killing stopped. So what was that about? Now that's something that you can find. One of my friends, the late great, now ancestor for almost 3 years, Sister Margaret Block, told me about that. She was heavy in the movement. She was a part of SNCC. Her brother is a legend of the civil rights movement as it relates to the Mississippi freedom struggle. His name was Sam Block. He himself was found dead under questionable circumstances in his apartment in L.A. back in 2000. But she was a neighbor. They were neighbors to MOOR, who lived in Cleveland, Mississippi. So she told me about that story about the black GIs being found in waterways. You're not going to hear a lot of this stuff in so-called contemporary history books or in the mainstream media. But I'm just telling you this. There's a brother named, what's his name? Akaneli Umoja. He's a professor down in Atlanta. I think I said his name right. But he wrote a book about the Mississippi freedom movement called We Will Shoot Back. You should check it out. It tells you about how black folks were not all nonviolent. That black folks got into firefights with the Klan, with the sheriff department. Sister Margaret Block talking about how her and her people used to get in shootouts with the Klan, along with Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Torrey. They would shoot it out with the Klan and with the sheriff departments down in Mississippi. She even taught her daughter how to make a Molotov cocktail when she was about 3 or 4 years old. So I got some interesting people I was blessed to meet on my journey. But check out the book, We Will Shoot Back, that talks about the Mississippi freedom struggle from a black point of view. And I'm about to wrap this up, family. But thank you all for listening and for tuning in. And please feel free to support the movement. Like I told you, all the good things we're doing, and the best is yet to come. So please feel free to hit us up on PayPal or make a recurring donation at patreon.com/WeAllBe, or buy some Artivist art or wear some out of his gear. We in there. And like I said, I thank you all for giving me a chance to share what I love to share, which is our history, and to hopefully help somebody along the way while I make my rounds, while I make my journey. And but I think I'll talk about Kim Van Dorn at a later date. But I just wanted to put that on y'all mind because it's been on my mind to talk about Kim Van Dorn. Hmm. Why in the hell do black women go to the military in the first place? That's a good question. Because a lot of times people go to the military not because they such not knocking nobody, but there's no jobs out here. So a lot of people go to the military because they get paid. People, it's a job. It's not, it's a patriotic thing. It's about money. Yeah, I send y'all the link to the Camp Van Dorn thing. It's the unexplainedfiles.com. And y'all can Google that up, unexplainedfiles.com or unexplained files Camp Van Dorn. Yeah, I mean, it's like I told y'all that Charles Hamilton Houston, he was an officer in World War One. They almost lynched him over in France. He was almost lynched by American white doughboys. These are the white soldiers from America during World War One. They call them doughboys. And he almost got lynched in full uniform. This is a guy who was the dean of Howard University Law School later on. He was the first black person to be a part of the Harvard Law Review. He was the first black editor of the Harvard Law Review. This is decades before Obama. He was the personal mentor of Thurgood Marshall and the architect of Brown v. Board decision. But he was almost lynched before he could do all those things. He was almost lynched by American soldiers during World War One just because they saw him as a threat. Because the white women, the Europeans prefer the black soldier over the white soldier. So, and they said that black soldiers had monkey tails and all this stuff. We had monkey tails, all right. That's a good question. What are the solutions? The only solution is learn truth and teach your kids, family, whoever wants to listen. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Because we need to learn these truths. These are some hard truths. Yeah. Yeah, Sister Barbara Williams and Dick Gregory words. This motherfucker ain't never been no good. Right? Now, Camp Van Dorn was 1943. Fort Pillow Massacre was 1864. I won't stop in Mississippi now, much less back then. Mississippi Mississippi is interesting because Mississippi is land of two, the tale of two different lands. Like you got some of the most impoverished areas in the country, Mississippi, and some of the most wealthiest areas in the country are in Mississippi. You got places in Mississippi that are amazing in terms of like Oxford and Starkville and Jackson. They urban. They're very urban. Or they're very. It's beautiful. Then you got places they got natural beauty. Then there are places in Mississippi that I will not go to after 6 o'clock at night. It got a sundown town mentality. I remember when my friend Margaret Block was still alive. She'll take me on her specialized tours of Mississippi. And every time we went to Tallahatchie County, that's where they found Emmett Till's body. She said, "Run, get my ass out of Tallahatchie County." She talked like that. "Run, get my ass. I better not be around. We better not be around this motherfucker after 6 o'clock run. I'm not fucking around. Get out of here." Because she had experience. She had a hit on her life. They put a contract killing on her back in the 60s because she was heavily involved in the movement in Mississippi. And she had a contract out on her life. And with this sister named Sister Bertie Alberta Kegler snuck her out of Tallahatchie County in a funeral hearse. Berta Kegler was interesting. I believe that's his sister name because her and a friend went to see Bobby Kennedy down in Jackson. And Bobby Kennedy said, uh, nothing better not happen to the people like her who went to came to see him allegedly in Jackson. But what my understanding was, as she was driving back to her home, she got in some type of real bad car accident. It was her and a female friend of hers, and I think a young white activist from Massachusetts. If I'm not mistaken, they look up Berta Kegler, and they were found decapitated, and the guy allegedly was unconscious while this happened. So I don't know what really happened. It sounded like they were murdered because she was heavily involved in the Mississippi Freedom Movement. That's just the Berta Kegler. But her and her friend was found decapitated after meeting with Bobby Kennedy in Jackson. But I guess that's it for now, family. Thank you all for tuning in. No, Matenka, I hope nothing happens. I'm gonna pray that you are protected with the spirit of the righteous ancestors and the Most High, that you have favor. And I'll make sure I want to pray that everybody have favor. Whatever you believe in, make sure that it's for your survival and for your success. And thank you, John Crowder. You said this is why this show is so important, because people need to know exactly what we are dealing with. Yeah, we're dealing with a monster. It's always the enemy within. Like Lincoln said, it's the enemy within. It's never the outside enemy. But keep the faith, people. Keep the fight up, Manteca. Okay, love y'all. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. God bless. The best is yet to come. Peace. One love.